Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Miocha and you are watching A News. Let's have a look at the headlines. Ukrainian, Russian and US delegations meet in Geneva for two-day talks as Volodymyr Zelensky warns of possible new Russian attacks. At least 3 people die and 3 others are critically injured in a shooting at a high school hockey game in Rhode Island. Second round of US-Iran nuclear talks ends in Geneva as draft texts are prepared and key differences remain. Thank you for tuning in. A new 2-day round of peace negotiations on Ukraine has begun in Geneva, bringing together delegations from Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. The Kremlin has cautioned against expecting immediate updates from the Ukraine peace talks, noting that the discussions are taking place behind closed doors. Officials say negotiations will continue through tomorrow, with territorial disputes the central obstacle in the conflict high on the agenda. US President Donald Trump is urging both parties to reach an agreement aimed at ending Europe's largest war since 1945. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that intelligence assessments suggest further Russian strikes on energy infrastructure are likely. He warned that such attacks would complicate efforts to secure an agreement to end the nearly 4-year conflict. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump described the peace negotiations as very easy. In his nightly video address delivered on the eve of fresh talks in Geneva with Russian and US officials, Volodymyr Zelensky said Moscow's strikes were evolving. He noted that the attacks now involve a combination of weapons systems and require specialized air defense capabilities to counter them.
Everything we discussed with partners in Munich must be implemented promptly. It is important that partners do not remain silent. Everyone is now awaiting the continuation of trilateral meetings. Our delegation is already in Geneva and preparing for negotiations. Russia cannot resist the temptation of the final days of winter cold and wants to strike Ukrainians painfully. The more evil comes from Russia, the harder it will be to reach any agreements with them. Partners must understand this. First and foremost, this concerns the United States. Soon we will mark a year of Ukraine's most active diplomacy. We agreed to all realistic proposals from America, starting with the proposal for an unconditional and long-term ceasefire. Russia rejects this, continues assaults at the front, and strikes on our cities and energy infrastructure. We expect partners to act so that forcing the aggressor to peace truly works.
Ukraine talks tomorrow as well in Geneva with Witkoff and Jared Kushner. What are you expecting there? Is there...
Well, they're big talks. It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you. We are in a position, we want them to come in.
The United Kingdom may need to accelerate its timetable for higher military expenditure, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said on Monday, as Westminster considers advancing its pledge to dedicate 3% of GDP to defense. His comments come amid renewed warnings over security risks linked to Russia and growing strain on the country's public finances. For more on this, we go to our Zainab Farajzadeh in Manchester.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said Britain must move faster on defense spending, signaling a possible shift in the government's military funding plans. Speaking to reporters on Monday, Starmer said the country needed to step up and accelerate defense investment, adding that the issue goes beyond how much money is spent. Westminster previously committed to raising defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, with a longer-term ambition to reach 3% in the next parliament, expected after the 2029 election. But new reporters say the government is now considering bringing that target forward. The government has cited security risks, including those linked to Russia, as part of its defense planning. However, the increase comes as Britain faces pressure on public finances. Last year, the government reduced its international aid budget to help fund the rise in defense spending. Britain's budget watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, has estimated that increasing defense spending to 3% of GDP would cost an additional £17.3 billion a year by 2029 to 2030. Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has also struggled to keep public finances on track, and the Treasury is cautious about accelerating defense spending further. A government spokesperson declined to comment on any revised plans, saying Britain is delivering the largest sustained increase in defense spending since the Cold War. No decision has yet been announced on bringing forward the 3% target. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
A high school ice hockey game in Rhode Island ended in tragedy on Monday, with at least 3 people killed in a shooting. Authorities believe the incident stemmed from a family dispute and say the suspect has now been identified.
At least 3 people have died and 3 others left in critical condition following a mass shooting at a high school ice hockey game in Rhode Island on Monday. The incident occurred at Lynch Arena in Pawtucket, an indoor skating rink. Authorities said they have identified the suspect, who also died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, and described the shooting as a targeted incident linked to a family dispute.
So what I can say right now that we have identified the person, the suspect, by a birth name. The birth name was Robert Dorgan. We have also learned that the person does go by the name of Roberta, also uses a last name of Esposito. But again, that will be all confirmed throughout the course of the investigation as to their status. That really doesn't have anything to do with the investigation.
Local media reported that the gunman, identified as the father of a North Providence High School senior, shot 5 members of the student's family. According to the reports, the student's mother was killed at the rink and a sibling later died in hospital. Eyewitnesses described scenes of panic, which involved around 13 shots being fired in rapid succession over 6 seconds, prompting spectators and student athletes to drop to the floor for cover.
Many were hugging their parents, rightfully so, and you could see some of the parents watching the players kind of roam and could feel and ask them, how are you doing? And you could see the tears starting to come down, and the parents hugging their kids, and I'm sure they're thanking God that they weren't the victim of the shooting and they're still alive with them today.
In a post on social media, FBI Director Kash Patel said agents had been deployed to assist with the investigation. Pawtucket, located just north of Providence near the Massachusetts state border, has a population of around 75,000 and is the 4th largest city in Rhode Island. The shooting comes roughly 2 months after a separate attack at Brown University, a few miles south of Pawtucket, in which 2 students were killed, 9 others wounded, and a days-long manhunt launched across the state.
A second round of U.S.-Iran negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program has concluded in Geneva, with Iran describing the talks as showing progress. Officials say draft texts will now be prepared, although significant differences remain.
Indirect negotiations between Iran and the United States have ended in Geneva with what Tehran describes as an understanding on key principles. But officials warn a full agreement is still some way off. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said both sides would now begin drafting texts, after which a date for a 3rd round would be set.
A new window of opportunity has opened, under which we had the 2nd round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region.
The talks, mediated by Oman, come against a backdrop of rising military tension. The United States has increased its forces in the Middle East, while President Donald Trump has warned of serious consequences if no deal is reached.
Iran's, but typically Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, responded with defiant remarks, saying attempts to depose his government would fail and warning that even the strongest military could be dealt a heavy blow. As negotiations were underway, Iran conducted military drills in the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil shipping route, though there was no immediate disruption to supplies. Oil prices fell after Araghchi's comments eased fears of an imminent escalation.
French President Emmanuel Macron has met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Mumbai to deepen strategic and economic ties between the two countries. During their discussions, the two leaders signed an agreement to prevent double taxation and explored expanded cooperation in innovation, artificial intelligence, and broader economic partnerships. France remains a key defense supplier to India, and the meeting follows New Delhi's approval of a $40 billion increase in military spending, including plans to acquire additional French-made Rafale fighter jets. In southern Gaza, in Khan Yunis, a subdued sense of anticipation is emerging ahead of Ramadan. Children hold small lanterns and market stalls are busy with shoppers, even as prices climb and employment opportunities diminish. Amid hardship and uncertainty, families are still finding ways to observe the holy month with faith and quiet resilience.
As the holy month of Ramadan approaches, Palestinians in southern Gaza are finding ways to celebrate with joy and preserve tradition. In Khan Yunis, parents are putting up simple decorations at home and helping children feel the spirit of Ramadan, while children hold small lights to mark the festive season. Evening markets come alive with shoppers browsing vegetable stalls, women and children exploring open-air bazaars, and street vendors cooking pastries and desserts, little signs of celebration and resilience amid hardship. Yet daily life remains extremely challenging. Families face rising unemployment, collapsing household incomes, and soaring prices. Israel's military actions and the ongoing blockade have deepened an already severe humanitarian crisis, making even basic Ramadan necessities, from staple foods to simple household items, difficult to secure. Despite scarcity and uncertainty, Palestinians are determined to preserve the traditions of the holy month. For many in Khan Yunis, Ramadan brings a mix of hope and worry.
Libya is marking 15 years since the uprising that brought an end to Muammar Gaddafi's 42-year rule. The conflict drew in NATO forces, claimed thousands of lives, and reshaped the country, which remains politically divided today.
15 years ago, protests in the eastern city of Benghazi ignited a revolt that would end 4 decades of rule by Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Inspired by uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, demonstrators first took to the streets in February 2011. They protested against corruption, repression, unemployment, and the absence of political freedoms. Gaddafi refused to step down.
Respond to them. Respond to the agents. Respond to these liars. Respond to the agents and the channels who are liars.
As demonstrations spread across Libya, security forces responded with force. Clashes escalated into civil war. Foreign workers fled the country as fighting intensified around key oil ports and cities. On March 17th, the United Nations Security Council authorized a no-fly zone.
The Security Council has authorized the use of force, including enforcement of a no-fly zone, to protect civilians and civilian areas targeted by Colonel Gaddafi, his intelligence and security forces, and his mercenaries.
NATO airstrikes followed, halting Gaddafi's advance on Benghazi. By August, rebel forces had seized Tripoli. Even as his compound fell, pro-government media vowed defiance. In October 2011, Gaddafi was captured in his hometown of Sirte, hiding in a storm drain. Rebels dragged him through the streets before he was killed. His body was displayed publicly for days, showing the intensity of popular anger and the depth of the uprising. Estimates suggest the conflict claimed at least 25,000 lives, with many more injured. Many hoped for democracy and stability afterwards. Instead, the country fell into years of political fragmentation and militia influence. Today, Libya remains divided between a UN-recognized government in Tripoli led by Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh and a rival authority in the east aligned with Khalifa Haftar. Elections promised in 2021 never took place, and state institutions remain weak despite significant oil revenues. Earlier this month, on February 3rd, the killing of Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, by unidentified gunmen in Zintan has again highlighted the fragile security situation. Once seen as a potential presidential contender, he represented both nostalgia for the past and unresolved tensions in the divided country.
Severe storms are continuing to batter New Zealand, triggering flooding, landslides, and widespread power outages. Authorities remain on high alert with further heavy rain forecast across both the North and South Islands. Here's more.
Heavy rain battered New Zealand's South Island on Tuesday, triggering flooding and forcing the closure of roads and bridges. The storm, which has caused widespread damage in Wellington since the weekend, moved south, bringing further disruption. A local state of emergency was declared on the Banks Peninsula near Christchurch, New Zealand's second largest city. Flooding, fallen trees and landslides have cut communications and power in some communities.
It's been happening, it happened last year, not as severely, but this is sort of like flash flood. Last year we were a bit more prepared for it, but yeah, no, it's crazy.
The country's Weather Bureau warned that a low-pressure system off the east coast could bring more heavy rain, causing rivers and streams to rise quickly and increasing the risk of landslides. Earlier, the storm hit large parts of the North Island, where flights were cancelled, major highways closed, and tens of thousands of residents lost power.
China has welcomed the Lunar New Year with its annual Spring Festival Gala, a widely watched television spectacle that blends long-standing tradition with modern technology. Celebrations have also taken place across Asia and beyond, including in Manila's historic Chinatown.
China has welcomed the Year of the Fire Horse with a spectacular Spring Festival Gala. The 4-hour show themed The Steed Gallops, Momentum Unstoppable. This year's gala blended traditional culture with modern innovation, weaving the spirit of the horse, symbolising perseverance and self-improvement throughout the performances. Audiences were treated to stirring songs, elaborate dance routines, opera, comedy sketches and magic acts, alongside high-tech elements including AI-driven stage effects and even AI-embodied robots performing a dynamic kung fu routine. The Spring Festival Gala, first broadcast in 1983 and recognised by Guinness World Records as the world's most watched annual television programme, remains a centrepiece of Lunar New Year celebrations. The festival itself was inscribed on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in December 2024. Celebrations extended far beyond mainland China. In Manila, tens of thousands of people flocked to Binondo, widely regarded as the world's oldest Chinatown, to usher in the Year of the Fire Horse. Fireworks painted the night sky in shifting colours as families visited temples, exchanged red envelopes, and watched traditional lion dances. And similar scenes played out across Asia and in Chinese communities worldwide.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll be discussing the high-stakes U.S.-mediated peace talks in Geneva aimed at ending the war in Ukraine, as well as the fresh round of nuclear diplomacy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Joining us now to talk on the U.S.-Iran negotiations, the American military buildup near Iran, as well as the Ukraine peace talks in Geneva is Lieutenant General Marco Serogna, joining us from Lisbon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's start with these nuclear negotiations in Geneva. Ahead of the talks, Iran launched live fire drills in the Strait of Hormuz. How much of an ace is the Strait for Tehran in the case of any possible military escalation?
So we have seen in the last day, previous to the second round of negotiations after Oman, not only the military buildup of the United States in the region with the movement of a second aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, to the Mediterranean, and all the ships that are linked to this movement, also huge military aircraft movements from the United Kingdom and from the United States to the region, also for the military bases, air bases in Jordania and in Qatar, and Diego Garcia also, and logistic, also lots of logistic deployments, special missiles, Patriot missiles that have been used in the last year when was the attack of the Iran to the West bases. The West spent a lot of Patriot missiles that have not been rebuilt the system, so they deploy a lot of the weapons from what is needed for in the case of a military operation, of course. And from the Iran side, always the same target, the threat to close the Strait of Hormuz, that will be a catastrophe, a chaos for the oil movement that come from the Persian Gulf, as we know, and that is the main card that Iran have. This is previous to the negotiations. But concerning the negotiations today, we have some. Well, it's not. Let's start by the positive part. The positive part is that both sides said that they exchanged the drafts of the papers concerning just one issue, the nuclear issue. That is, we know that Iran want to keep the negotiation inside this perimeter of the nuclear issue, with some red lines, as you know, the capability to enrich uranium and to keep with themselves the uranium that was already enriched and that it's in some places, that as we know, and the capability, of course, of have nuclear capability for Pacific purpose, so no military purpose.
As you've mentioned, the U.S. assets in the area, we have now 2 aircraft carriers, a number of F-35s have arrived. Now, there have been some somewhat positive signals out of Geneva today, but if the negotiations fail down the line and then intervention does happen, what can that even look like?
Let's see. The United States, at least is my view, the United States are following the negotiations process until the time when the military buildup is complete. So, and the military buildup is complete with the arrival of the second aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean, to the Eastern Mediterranean, somewhere in 1 week or something like that. So after that, I suppose that the United States are going to push to expand the scope of the negotiations, not only the military issue, the nuclear issue, but also the ballistic missile technology and stockpiles. That is something that Israel is pushing very much the United States to insert that in the negotiations. And even the question of the behavior of the regime concerning the demonstrations and the demonstrators. So at that point in time, I suppose that the United States are going to push the lines more in to Iran to incorporate more things and to have Iran to give up of some of these demands to enrich uranium and to keep uranium inside Iran. So after that, I suppose we have seen that Donald Trump, the Trump administration, when built a military built up like this one, it's for use, I suppose. They have done it in the Venezuela, as you know, in Korea, and I suppose that they are going to do it of course, it's a tough decision. That we have a lot of countries in the region that are opposing that with the fear that it could create a chaos in the region. But we have on the other side Israel pushing very much to have these red lines on board of the negotiation. So let's see. The scope of the military operation is huge, from some chirurgical bombardments to heavy bombardments during weeks, trying to weak the regime, and to figure out solutions in the ground with the Iranians or the Iranian opposition in the ground, try to have something from that for. I don't know if it's a regime change, but a regime more open to not democratic, of course, but more open to incorporate some of the opposition side inside the leadership of the regime. So, but it's something that we have to wait for a third round of negotiations, and after trying to figure out what the United States can do. But the main thing is that nobody built up a military capacity as this one without having in mind to use it. It's very expensive, as you know, to keep this.
As these negotiations go on, Iranians said that a understanding was reached with the Americans on the main principles. However, given past experiences when the U.S. decided to join Israeli strikes on Iran, which began in the middle of previous nuclear negotiations, do you expect something similar happening again?
Let's see. We could have two different things. We know. Let's see. It's my mind for the time being. I suppose that the U.S. it's trying, if needed, to have a military operation to push Iran once again to the negotiation table, but with more weak. He wants to do it without Israel capabilities. So I suppose that is the first part of the game. Of course, that we know that the Iran has a huge card to play, that is a preemptive attack to Israel. And that's why the second aircraft carrier is going for the region, not only to attack Iran, but also to help with the air defense, air ballistic missiles defense with the Aegis frigates, to help Israel against this course of action that Iran could use, trying to spoil the situation in the region, involving other countries eventually. So that is something that Iran could do. At the end of the day, we can have, if the things get bad, of course, a joint venture between Israel and the United States, and Israel could push for that also. It has done it in the first attack, as we know, and so it's a joint operation against Iran. So we can have here this kind of these different times that we can expect, but I suppose only after a third round of negotiations. But the third round will be tough with all the military assets, American military assets in place, and I suppose that the United States are going to expand the scope not only for the nuclear issue, but also the ballistic missile technologies and stockpiles, and also the behavior of the regime. And that is, we are adding to this a lot of red lines from Iran. So will be, I suppose at the end of the day, some kind of military operation is going to happen. A small one in the beginning with, I don't know, some more surgical to Iranian Revolutionary Guard and other nuclear sites probably, and even to the regime, I don't know. And we'll see if that stops after a single shot, as we say, a single shot, or the United States have the need to expand that for a more robust military operation within 1 or 2 weeks to weaken Iran, weaken the Iranian regimes in a way that the opposition could, from inside, try to change the regime. It's two different kinds, targets or objectives, strategic objects, but we have to understand that Israel is pushing very much the United States for a change of regime, of course without boots on the ground, but because the United States are not going to do that as they did in Iraq, but with the military air operation, the bombardment to the most important targets that could weaken the regime in Iran. So
a bit earlier, you've mentioned
we have to wait, I suppose, for the third round of negotiations.
You've mentioned that possibility of a joint American-Israeli operation. In such a case, what kind of capabilities do Iran-aligned groups in the region have to respond?
They can do a little bit of the same that they did in the past. Hezbollah is very weak, and Israel is not going to permit that the Hezbollah in Lebanon could use their own missiles. It's more difficult. The Houthis in the Yemen, they can do something. Of course, they did, and they have the capability to do something. Of course, they have been bombed by Israel several times, and even by Saudi Arabia, as we know, in the last months. So, but they are capable to do something. But I suppose not enough to create a huge impact in the system. So, what we don't know for the time being is the capability that how much the Iranian armed forces and the Revolutionary Guard rebuilt their air defense capability. That's very much destroyed by the Israelis in the previous operations. So we know that they rebuilt it. They rebuilt the capability of the launchers of the missiles also, because a lot of them has been destroyed. Let's see if they have been able to rebuild the capability. They have a huge stockpile of missiles, more than 1,000 used. So it's something, of course, that could create problems especially to Israel and to the military bases in the U.S. military bases in the Gulf. So it's something that. But at the end of the day, the military capabilities of the United States are used. To aircraft carriers, it's a lot of stuff, bombing with high technology, as we know, and with the capability to create a huge damage in the regime, because the main targets will be the Revolutionary Guard bases, the nuclear sites, and even the headquarters of the armed forces and of the regime. So it will take time, more than between 1 and 2 weeks of heavy bombardments every day, and try to figure out what will happen at the end of the day, or if Iran want to sit again in the table. Of course, the diplomacy is not going to stop, as we saw in other military options, but diplomacy at the same time. So trying to figure out if Iran could withdraw some of these their red lines and sit again at the table and sign a better agreement for the U.S. and Israel side, of course.
Well,
so
then
it's
in
something
general,
that we'll know in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
We will be sure to find that out.
Everybody
Thank you
hopes
so
that
much.
the war it's not going to happen, of course, but it's something that is in the table because the military built up there. It's
Thank you so much for your insight and analysis. That's all the time we have.
Thank you very much for having me today.
After a short break, we'll take a look at the major stories from across the region. Welcome back. Iranian authorities say they have rescued hundreds of Afghan migrants stranded in freezing conditions near the border, underscoring the risks of irregular crossings in the region. A News' Tamim Bahis reports from Kabul.
Iran's state news agency IRNA reports that around 300 undocumented Afghan migrants were rescued in the border district of Teabad in northern eastern Razavi Khorasan province. Local officials said the group had become trapped in rain, cold temperature and harsh winter conditions while attempting to move through difficult border routes. Authorities say those rescued were taken to designated centers where they received warm food, temporary shelter and medical assistance. Officials added that several people were suffering from cold-related illnesses and frostbite and were treated on site. According to the report, after receiving assistance and completing legal procedures, the migrants were expected to be handed over to Afghan authorities. Teabad, which lies along the Iran-Afghanistan border, is considered one of the main crossing points used by undocumented migrants. Many Afghan attempting to reach Europe travel through Iran and then Turkey, often relying on irregular routes and smugglers, and frequently without valid travel documents. The incident underscores the risks migrants face during winter months as freezing temperatures and difficult terrain continue to pose life-threatening dangers along key migrant corridors. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard's Navy conducted drills in the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, a day ahead of renewed nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States. A News' Turaj Shiralilu reports from Tehran.
The Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, staged a combined war game codenamed Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz on Monday in one of the world's most critical energy checkpoints. The Strait of Hormuz, where the drill is held, is a narrow maritime corridor through which a major share of global oil exports transit. Led by IRGC's top commander, Major General Mohammad Pakpour, objectives of the drill include assessing combat readiness of naval units, reviewing contingency and security plans, and rehearsing counter-response. The drills started one day ahead of indirect nuclear negotiations with the U.S. on Tuesday in Geneva. Earlier, Secretary of Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani said that Iran does not seek war, but it will not bow to U.S. threats, relying on a combination of negotiations and deterrence. In an interview, Larijani said that Iran will target U.S. bases in the region if it is attacked, stressing that Tehran's ballistic missiles capability is not on the agenda of nuclear talks in Geneva. According to Iran's security chief, U.S. demand of zero enrichment makes no sense. Tehran says its nuclear program is solely for civilian purposes and is ready to assuage concerns regarding nuclear weapons by building trust that enrichment is and will stay for peaceful purposes. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Monday met Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Geneva, to discuss cooperation with the IAEA and technical aspects of the impending talks with the United States. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, for A News.
A military court in Azerbaijan's capital has delivered its verdict in the high-profile case of Armenian citizen Ruben Vardanyan, sentencing him to 20 years in prison after finding him guilty on multiple serious charges related to the conflict period.
A court in Baku has delivered a verdict in the high-profile case against Armenian citizen Ruben Vardanyan. The Baku military court sentenced him to 20 years in prison after finding him guilty on multiple serious charges.
Vardanyan was convicted under several articles of Azerbaijan's criminal code, including crimes against peace and humanity, war crimes, terrorism, and financing terrorism. The trial, which lasted over a year, was conducted openly and according to legal procedures. The defendant was provided with a Russian-language interpreter and state-funded legal counsel. His proceedings were handled separately from other trials related to the conflict and included over 400 volumes of evidence. Prosecutors had sought a life sentence, citing the severity and scope of the crimes. Ruben Vardanyan is a former citizen of the Russian Federation and a prominent figure in the post-Soviet business world. He co-founded the investment firm Troika Dialog and served on the boards of major Russian corporations. Forbes previously estimated his net worth at $1.2 billion. While Vardanyan built a public image as a philanthropist and modernizer, his business activities have faced international scrutiny. Investigations, including the 2019 OCCRP report Troika Laundromat, linked him to a network of offshore companies through which billions of dollars flowed during his tenure at Troika Dialog. Earlier, ANU's investigations premiered the documentary The Oligarch's Design, which traces Ruben Vardanyan's rise from Moscow's financial elite to political influence in the region. Drawing on expert analysis and open source data, the film highlights how Vardanyan leveraged wealth and opaque networks to extend his power beyond formal politics. The Baku military court emphasized that the verdict was the result of a legal process conducted according to the law. The ruling holds Vardanyan accountable for crimes committed during the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, concluding a thorough judicial review.
A Middle Eastern consortium has unveiled a $700 million plan to develop a high-capacity digital data corridor through Iraq to Turkey. A-News' Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
A consortium of 3 Middle Eastern technology companies has unveiled plans for a major data connectivity project designed to link the United Arab Emirates to Turkey through Iraq. The $700 million initiative, known as WorldLink, would position Turkey as a strategic transit hub for digital traffic moving between Asia and Europe. Under the plan, an undersea data cable would run from the UAE to Iraq's Fao Peninsula, before continuing northward through a terrestrial network into Turkey. Project managers say the proposed route is intended to provide an alternative to existing pathways that pass through the Suez Canal, helping to reduce congestion and shorten transmission times. According to officials involved, the WorldLink system will be privately funded and rolled out in phases over the next 5 years. The project comes amid surging global demand for faster and more reliable data connections, driven by the rapid expansion of AI technologies, cloud computing, and cross-border digital services. Industry analysts say high-capacity data infrastructure is increasingly critical to supporting AI operations, financial transactions, and large-scale data transfers. The initiative's backers say the project will improve regional connectivity, increase network resilience, and boost Turkey's appeal as a destination for technology and data center investment. This is Adam Morrow for A-News in Istanbul, Turkey.
More on this topic after a very short break. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Now to talk on the newly announced data routes meant to connect Asia and Europe. We're joined by Özgür Güven, sustainability and energy expert, coming to us from Ankara. Welcome, great to have you on the program. Let's start with the WorldLink. It's supposed to link the UAE with Turkey via Iraq using subsea and terrestrial cables in a more direct way than the current lines that go around the Arabian Peninsula, through the Red Sea, and finally through the Suez Canal. How much is this a matter of faster connections, and how much of it is motivated, would you say, by security concerns?
No, I don't think it has an effect on the speed, because after all, this is all fiber optic cables, but it is more about security and also creating an alternative route, because as far as I know, I'm not an expert on communication, digital communication, but over 90% of current cables are going under the sea, submarine lines. So therefore, I think UAE, and I'm sure it's international partners, so as the ones in Turkey, are all considering to create an alternative from land, which is, I believe it makes a lot of sense. And I think we are going to talk about digital geopolitics from now on, other than the same usual geopolitics.
Now that you mentioned that, just 10 days ago, another link, the Silk Link, was announced as a new project between Saudi Arabia and Syria, meant to build out a national fiber network in the country reeling from a civil war. But it's also meant to provide another data corridor avoiding the Red Sea. Are these two links competing in a way, and what can that bring?
I mean, from my understanding, the Saudi and Syrian initiative is more about like increasing the connectivity of Syria, like more than connecting it to Europe, I believe, because I don't have in my knowledge, I don't know much about like the KSA, the Saudi government's eagerness to be a hub for more data centers and all. But I know UAE is very keen on it. They are increasing their potential. But I am pretty sure that the Saudi-Syrian line may be connected to this, or another line through Turkey to Europe. Maybe it can be, because the KSA and Turkey are very keen on helping Syria to become a strong nation on its own. So I don't think that they're going to be a competition. At least I can speak from the Turkish side. We would not think it as a competition for anything else. We would rather keep our Syrian brothers to get along, to be included anything for their self-sufficiency and for their new prosperous Syrian government.
In any case, for either of these routes to get to Europe, they would go through Turkey. What would that mean for Ankara?
Well, for Ankara, I think I mentioned earlier, like we will talk about digital geopolitics. Like Turkey is already in the middle. Yes, we've been. Turkey is a hub for logistics. Turkey is a hub for international many corridors, like the Middle Corridor. As we speak, time to time, I join to your programs, and then the One Belt One Road initiative, and then aviation. Turkey is already a hub through a strong new Istanbul airport, and I believe this will just add another corridor as the digital communication corridor or digital pipelines. I mean, until now we were talking about oil pipelines, we were talking about gas pipelines, and the 20th century was ruled by oil pipelines and gas pipelines, and I think 21st century we'll be talking about digital lines, which will have more potential, which will have more impact on geopolitical level than older, like the conventional pipelines as we know, the gas or the oil, including the increasing potential of renewable energy in Turkey. And as far as I know, UAE keen on it with the renewable, with the solar mainly over there, that when we add them together, because for any capacity in digital, for AI, for anything, we need more energy. And as far as I know, we need also energy for cooling, for both. And renewables are the optimum resource for this, especially the end users. Like we think about all those big giant players like Google, Alpha, and Elon Musk, and all others. They are all keen on renewable energy to source and also to cool off these data centers. And Turkey is already increasing its potential in digital for renewable energy as well. So I think it's a good combination, and Turkey deserves to be in the middle.
Well, Ozgur, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight with A News.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. That's all we have for you for now. Stay tuned to A News.